All right.
We are rolling, sir.
Sick.
Thank you for coming through to do this, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
So we'll jump right into it. What's your full name?
Christopher John Owens.
Are you named after anybody?
Yeah. A priest in New Jersey.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's where you grew up?
No.
Okay.
That's
more interesting.
where I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I grew up with my grandparents, who actually were both from Louisville, but they had lived in New Jersey for a long time. They moved there like right after they got married when they were 15 and fucking 16 years old.
No way.
That's what happened then.
Yeah.
And then they had just moved back with their kids in like 78, and then I was born basically right after that. Yeah.
Cool. And what was it like growing up there?
In Louisville? Mostly not that great.
Yeah.
There's like certain things that you think, like, I think I used to sort of justify and be like, well, it's a good thing that I had this experience because it made me tougher. But then, like, when now that I live here and I have my friends that like grew up in LA and grew up in California and had these like amazing lives, and I'm like, that experience, that wasn't really like a character building experience. That just kind of sucked. And I really would have rather have like grown up in.
I would have had that.
I would rather have had that. Yeah, exactly. So, it's better than the worst place in the world. It's not Indiana.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Shots fired.
Yeah.
I went there for a wedding with my ex-girlfriend a while back, and I actually thought it was really cool, but that was also like 4 years ago.
It's one of those cities that you can have like an amazing 48 hours in.
Yeah, that was what it was.
And because also a lot of people don't know anything about it, or they have this very low expectation, and then you go and you're like, oh, there's like this much culture here. It's like kind of cool. It's not this like total backwards weird hick town, but you basically in about a day or two you do everything interesting that there is to do, and then it's Groundhog Day from there on out.
Yeah.
Did
you have both your parents growing up?
No.
Okay.
I was raised by my grandparents.
Right.
So I knew my mom, but I never lived with her, so she was kind of like an aunt. And then I've never met my father.
Okay.
Who's Persian. I think he ended up in Kentucky when he escaping the Iranian Revolution. And my mom just has a thing for brown-skinned guys that don't speak English very well.
Okay.
And here I am.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, fuck, I'm glad whatever that equation was brought you here, man, because you're fucking awesome.
And I think flattery will get you everywhere.
So, wow. And I'm assuming based on your grandparents getting married so young, did your parents have you when they were pretty young?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like that's
17 when she had me. So
okay.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you doing when you were growing up in Louisville?
I was never allowed to have video games or play video games. We never had cable television.
Okay.
I was given knives and allowed to shoot guns when I was like 6 or 7 years old.
Okay. Hunting?
So
or are you just doing it for fun?
No, I've never hunted.
Targets or something?
I've never killed an animal.
Okay.
I'm not really into that aspect of it, but just mostly, I have guns now. I actually just think growing up in Kentucky, especially from the time I was a teenager on, I revolted against all things redneck because I was way too punk for that. And then you're kind of like responding, like reacting to your surroundings. And then I moved to LA, and you realize that you have all of like the fun parts of redneck stuff in California, minus all of the Republican baggage. So after moving to LA, I bought an assault rifle. I got into monster trucks. I got into wrestling.
No way.
And all of these things that I would never have anything to do with when I was living in Kentucky, because I was just fucking listening to Black Flag and Minor Threat and revolting against rednecks. And then now it's like all those things here. You don't have like Larry the Cable Guy or whatever that's like into it. It's just all like Mexicans that want to party.
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck yeah, this is awesome.
That's killer, man. That's crazy. So I'm assuming there wasn't a lot going on, and it was music. What was like the way that you fell into like the punk culture world? How was like music discovery happening? Were you going to shows?
I grew up in like not a cool area. It would be like the Panorama City or Pacoima of Louisville or something, basically.
Okay.
Kind of, maybe even the Chatsworth.
Okay.
Sort of like way out in the sticks, not in the Silver Lake of Louisville.
Right.
And there was one record store there, and this was also like in the 80s and like early 90s, and just had radio. So what really got me into music was actually I had two uncles that at two separate times were on house arrest and living with my grandparents.
Okay.
And the first one, I think I was about 6. I think I was maybe had just started first grade, and I had been into music, but just like shit that like my grandmother would play or like hear around the house. I didn't really know too much. I didn't have an access to it. And he was staying with us on house arrest, and gave me a copy of Led Zeppelin 1. And
Okay.
I remember the very first time I put the cassette into my Walkman and was in the backyard, and then just heard like Good Times, Bad Times and the guitar like on that. And I was just like, I have to do this. I was like, holy fuck. That was like a pivotal, life-changing moment.
Epic.
And then the second instance that really led me down the dark path that has led me to this point here was when I was in 5th grade. I had another uncle on house arrest for multiple DUIs, was living with us, and he had made me a copy of Appetite for Destruction because I really wanted it, and my grandparents would not allow me to listen to rock music at all. And then on the backside, like the Maxell, like he put Master of Puppets, but he put the songs in out of order. So the first song on there was Disposable Heroes, and I somehow or another, like I got the tape, and like it was like I had, heard Guns N' Roses on the radio, and I was into that, and I put it in, but it was like on the B side, and it was already rewound to that side, and I was like, oh, and I just pressed play, and then Disposable Heroes comes on, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? I'm like, holy shit. And then like got into like Metallica and Slayer, and then I guess I was in 8th grade after that, and this other family moved in, and they moved down the street, and their dad was their like this church's music supervisor or whatever. But all the kids there's 2 of them that were like roughly my age, like a year young. One was a year younger, was a year older.
Nice.
And they skated, and they got into skating with them, and they were like, have you ever heard of Minor Threat? And I'm like, no. And then just like got into like Minor Threat, Black Flag, and then also around the same period of time was getting into like Ghetto Boys and NWA, and then just that was all through high school. And then I actually got paid money to go to college.
No way.
And I went for 9 days, and then I quit to go on a shitty 2-week tour with my punk band at the time, and I never went back, and then here I am now.
What were you into in terms of like when you were in like elementary school and like junior high school? Were there like things that stuck out to you subject wise, or were you already just kind of like revolution?
I hated school. School was a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
I did not do well in school.
Yeah.
And part of it was environment, and like I didn't want to fuck with anybody that was there. Like I just knew this wasn't a group of the demographic that I like felt like I had anything in common with. Also, like, and this is anything too, when I talk to some people about, like, some people will see, like, my friends now will see like pictures of me when I was a kid, and they're like, oh my gosh, you must have been the coolest kid. And like the absolute least cool thing you could do in my neighborhood in Louisville, Kentucky when I was growing up was listen to metal and punk and have long hair and skate.
Yeah.
That
like
was
complete counterculture.
That was the absolute least cool thing to do. And as a matter of fact, it was like incited violence on you.
Yeah.
It would to be perpetrated on you for just simply doing that.
Yeah.
So
wild.
Like it wasn't a pleasant experience.
Yeah.
To be into that stuff, and it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But, as far as like the like in the
Yeah.
public and in the school system,
Sure.
stuff like that. And actually, when I was in elementary school, they put me in special ed classes because I had bad handwriting. And the teachers were just like, I don't know, we think he's probably retarded. And like it was like
Just from your
bad.
handwriting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Louisville.
and again, here I am now. Yeah.
Amazing, man.
Yeah.
So you're go to college for a few days, doesn't
Yeah.
work out.
Doesn't
You're
work
going
out.
on tour, you're doing a punk band,
Yeah.
or you're playing what and singing what?
I was playing guitar and singing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And that's like right around that high school,
Yeah, this is
out of high school into
this
college,
is,
like
yeah,
18, 19 kind of age.
yeah.
Okay,
And this
cool.
is like, like 97
Okay.
ish. And then at that point I had started recording music. And it started like when I was in high school, and I started playing in bands. And I remember the first time, you think about, oh, yeah, like you want to record, and like, how do you do that? And this is also like, like pre-internet, and I in this fairly like culturally isolated thing. There's like no other outlet. You don't know anything about anything, and we had a jam box, a cassette jam box. So we were trying to record. We're like, oh, this just sounds like shit, and you try to put it at different places in the room and find the best place, and then. One of my friends that was playing drums, his older sister had this like karaoke machine, and it had 2 mic inputs that you could adjust the levels of separately. And I'm like,
We're in.
Oh, fuck yeah. So then we get this karaoke machine, and I start playing around with 2 mics, and then figuring out like, oh, I can kind of put one on the drums and then one on the guitar and the bass, and like do this other stuff. And then somehow or another, and I don't even remember how, but like I'd heard about a 4-track, and I'm like, oh, what the fuck is a 4-track? And there was this music rental place, and I rented a Tascam Porta 7. And I don't know if you ever saw that one. It was like the cassette one. It had the little round like discs for the knobs on it.
I want to say I actually have, because I feel like I had JP, a friend of mine, telling me that was like a little cassette recorder I could buy to just have something here, like a tone, like a different tone kind of thing to have, but nothing. I'm familiar with, like, I don't know if it's that exact unit, but the similar like cassette little 4-channel Tascams.
So I got the Tascam Porta 7, which was not the cool 4-track. There was like the 424, which is like the hip.
That one that had like the pitch modulation on it. There was one that has, maybe that's newer.
I think they all did to a degree, the tape speed thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had this shitty Porta 7. I just, with no instructions, figure out how to use it by just pressing the knobs and playing with it.
Sure.
And then it's like I record like demo this band I was in, and then my other friends were in the band. They're like, oh fuck, you can record. Can you record our band? So I recorded their band, and then it had sort of like just kept going, and then I learned about more stuff, and then I rented these 2 blackface ADATs, and I had this old PV Mark IV mixing console, and was taking that from like garage to garage, and then like kind of upgraded to that. And so by the time I was in like had started college, I was like actually charging people money to record.
Sure.
Go on this ill-fated 2-week tour, never go back. Started working at UPS instead, and my grandparents had already been like, if you don't go to college, we're kicking you out of the house. So I moved out when I got back, and we rented this house with everybody in my band. And then I was like, oh yeah, by the way, Grandma, I quit college. Fuck you. And then, so I was working at UPS loading airplanes and recording bands, and did that for about 6 years until I was in another band that had actually started touring more for real and doing real records. And they had told me that I went into used all my vacation time, but I was like, oh, just don't pay me. And they were like, son, you got to make a decision. What do you want to do with your life? You want to play in a rock band, or you want to work at UPS? And I said, play in a rock band. And I walked out the door, and I walked off the lot, and I never came back to that job. And then I had my first studio that was in the loft of this warehouse that was like in the hood, in this sort of area of Louisville that it was next to this trailer park that was basically like tranny prostitutes and crack dealers.
Okay.
And
you're in the thick of it.
It was in the thick of it. It was in a
very punk. That was a punk studio.
I paid $40 a month for it.
Oh my God.
And it was not worth $41 a month.
That's fucking wild, man.
Yeah. So that was my first like commercial studio. And then I had quit that. So then I was simply playing in a band and recording. And at that point in time, my rate to record was $50 a day.
Nice.
And this would be like sort of like early 2000s, and that kind of gradually went up from there.
Sure.
Then it was like $100 a day, and even at that building, so I was playing in this band Lords at the time, and we had signed with this label Initial. They had some kind of bigger like ish Midwestern kind of like indie punk bands at the time, and we did our first EP, and then I started having like bands actually travel to Louisville to do records with me.
No way.
In this shitty space, and because I was like at that point, then I was just like, $50 a day isn't enough. It's like, how about $100 a day? And everyone was like, fuck yeah. And then then I ended up eventually, there was this other guy that I sort of knew, and he had gone to Full Sail, got a degree. His mom bought him a building.
Whoa.
Which of course I think she paid like $50,000 for or whatever. And he had a studio there that he had sort of built out. But he had no gear. And he sucked at recording. And so the drummer for my band had like knew him somehow, and like he had filled in on some band that was recording his spot. And he was like, man, your room's really cool, but you don't have gear. And I had at this point started to get some real gear. I had some like Cytec preamps. I had a pair of 414 like ULSs. I started to get some like decent mics and some decent gear. And but it was in this literal $40 a month shithole.
Crazy. How real quick, we'll come back to where we're at, but how are you learning about the equipment, and how are you acquiring equipment?
I was just finding it and buying it, and this, I guess, internet was around, kind of at this point.
Yeah, like mostly eBay type things.
Yeah, lots of eBay stuff, lots of used stuff. I was never buying stuff new.
Sure.
Actually, what I did get during that era was a lot of I don't know if you remember when the real Russian Octava mics were on.
I do.
Was it like Musician's Friend or whatever? And they were like $100 a piece for like the 319 and 012s.
I don't remember that, but I know those. I know the brand of the mics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a period of time where it was the actual real ones.
Yeah.
That were the Russian ones that were really good. And they were $100 a piece, and I got like 3 of the 319s and a pair of the 012s.
Sick.
And I remember getting them, and I was like, I didn't even know what they were. I thought they looked cool. And I was like, holy shit, these actually kind of sound fucking good.
Yeah.
And then there was a thing later on where they stopped getting the real Russian ones and had these Chinese knockoffs and whatever.
The path of most music manufacturing.
So anyway, I had that stuff, and I was also like Steve Albini obsessed at that point in time, and there was the Electrical Audio Forum.
Okay.
And that's his studio in Chicago.
Yep.
And lots of nerd gear talk on that.
Cool.
Lots of nerd gear talk. And so that's how I got into like this, discovered the Cytec pre's, which I don't know if you've ever used those.
I'm not familiar with those.
They're really good at, and I still have them. And then the entire time I was actively recording bands was still use them, even when I had much, much, much nicer stuff. They're like the pre's racked up out of the Neotech consoles.
Okay.
And those are my first like real mic pre's. But anyway, I had that gear, moved that into the space, and then that was my commercials, first kind of real commercial studio.
Nice.
Basically until I moved to LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was, how long did that run for?
Fuck, a while, like 6 or 7 years.
Okay. And so that brings you to like early 2000s, like mid 2000s, 5, 6, something like that when you're moving out here? Or maybe
no, after
earlier.
that. It was I moved here in 2011.
Okay, cool.
So maybe it was longer than that, yeah.
Okay, cool. What was it like? Why LA, and what was it like?
Well, I had been touring a bunch.
Okay.
And in the band Lords that I was in, and basically had never really spent more than 2 or 3 months max in Louisville consecutively without leaving for a month or two. From the time I was like 20 until I was 32 at that point.
Okay.
And then that band kind of fell apart, and we were supposed to go back to Europe, and we had to cancel that, and all this other stuff. And I did an 8-month straight stretch in Louisville, and that was the longest span of time I had been there, in like more or less a decade at that point.
Sure.
And was about to shoot myself in the fucking head.
Yeah.
And there were some other things that had happened too. Like we had a bunch of dead bass players and a bunch of dead musicians friends. There's lots of overdoses, lots of suicide in the music and art community in Louisville.
Sure.
It's a very bleak place, especially if you're like a creative, because there's just no
inspiration, nothing.
There's no real
nowhere to
outlet.
go.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, there's lots of inspiration, and I feel like there's like really good musicians there, but there's like you can't monetize it into a living.
Okay.
And like you get to a certain point where it's like, well, go work in a factory and play in your shitty cover band on the weekend, or just quit.
Yeah.
You know, or move.
Sure.
And that's what happens. Everyone either like ends up in a working in a factory or warehouse of some sort, or have some other kind of shitty job, or they commit suicide, or they overdose, or they move. I moved.
Not a lot of options.
Yeah.
Pick the right option.
Yeah. But one of my best friends, who was the bass player in Lords, had died about a year prior of an overdose.
Shit.
And that was sort of this awakening moment. And I
Yeah.
kind of I started to look around, and like there was one dude, I don't even remember his real name, but his like punk name was Spectre.
Okay.
And when I was first going to punk shows, when I was like 13 or 14, and he was probably like 20, and I remember seeing this guy, and at this point I'm like 32 and he's like fucking 50 or whatever.
Shit. Okay.
Just sitting on the same bar stool. And then I start to look around, and I had this moment of clarity, and you see like all of these people that I've known through this community, and like the ones that are still alive. And it's just like, it's almost like if you look at this time lapse of a person just getting fatter and older, and like, it's like that. And then just depressed and like sitting at the exact same bar stool they've been sitting at for, 10, 20 years, however fucking long it ends up being. And just like, and I'm like, oh God, like this can't be my life.
That's a wild like vision experience to sit through.
And I just had this whole like life changing sort of perspective, and I'm like, I can't stay here. And then I had a bunch of friends everywhere that I knew from touring, and I had a lot of friends in New York and a lot of friends in LA, and very, 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 very briefly considered New York, except that I hate winter.
Okay.
And it was also winter when I kind of had this sort of life epiphany, and I was like, you know what? And I also had this other thing, and maybe you have encountered this in your profession as well, is at a certain point, I was just had to reevaluate everything in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I happy? And I wasn't. And I realized it's like, but I have this like fantasy in my mind. It's like, I'm just out there touring in bands and recording bands and living life like the way I want to live it. But I was broke. I was constantly stressed. It actually wasn't fun, and I actually wasn't happy. It's like I was making myself miserable doing all of these things that I thought made me happy. And so I was like, what do I need to be happy? What actually makes me happy? And I was like, well, right now it's cold as fuck and I want to be warm, and being warm makes me happy. And LA is always warm compared to there.
Sure.
So I came here, and I had a bunch of friends, and was recording and working right out of the gate.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, so that's how I ended up here.
Where'd you land when you first got here?
So this is a good story. Well, one of my oldest friend from LA is Laurel Stearns. I don't know if you've ever met Laurel, and
Nope.
She's kind of been around forever in music management and a lot of different capacities. And I met her in Louisville probably around 2002, I think, ish. And she was doing A&R for Capitol at that time.
Okay.
And she had just signed the Decemberists. She was on tour with the
Nice.
Decemberists.
Good taste.
And she was at this bar that was like the punk bar in Louisville, and was talking to some people, and we're like, what are some bands from Louisville that I should know about? And then somebody was like, oh, you got to hear this band Lords. And so I get a cold call from her, and she's like, hi, this is Laurel Stearns from Capitol Records, and
No way.
somebody told me I should check out your band. And I'm like, fucking hey. And I go and meet her, and I give her some records and stuff, and we had just finished this 7-inch that was about to come out. And she calls me back the next day, and she was like, oh my God, Chris, I love your band. Your band is amazing. I can never put it out in Capitol. And then we just sort of became friends, and we signed a Jade Tree. They ended up doing our next full length. And then Laurel had this side label that she did called Cold Sweat with her friend Sam Velde, who's also now one of my best friends. And they just did like all these sort of punk releases and bands that she couldn't put out on Capitol, but liked and wanted to work with.
Cool.
So they did some vinyl releases for us, and then they started booking LA shows for us. And kind of met a network of people around the two of them. And so when I was coming, it was kind of up in the air. I didn't really have a plan. I actually already had 2 records that I was going to do with bands. And then I knew that I needed some supplemental form of work on top of that. And this is a little bit of a sidetrack tangent, but right before I moved, I had was just doing everything I could to make as much money as possible, because I had some credit card debt and I just wanted to pay off that, be completely debt free. I wanted to have a new-ish vehicle and have like $4 or $5 grand in cash in my pocket. And I managed to do all that in like 3 months. And
Sick.
this, like, literally kind of insane thing, some of which I can't really talk about in public. But I had all kinds of hustles going on. And one of which was like all these Craigslist things. And I had answered this Craigslist ad for a guy that wanted somebody to pay him to figure out how to use this digital Tascam recorder.
Okay.
And I'm like, fuck yeah, I can do that. So I go and have this working with this guy, and it's really weird. I think it's going to lead to some strange sexual things, because he like will show up, dramatically overpay me, and then I'd like hang out for like 30 minutes, and then he'd be like, that's all I can do. And like, and it's this
Weird setup.
old rich guy. And then want to just hang out and watch this fucking Robin Trower DVDs and shit like that. I'm like, no, man, I'm good. But as it turned out, he was a retired lawyer. His wife had died. He had a fuck ton of money, and he had a stroke. And like he couldn't retain like new information, and he had to have it be super repetitive, and he could only like learn like 1 or 2 small things at a time and then go over that a lot. And that's like take it very incrementally.
Sure.
And I was like, man, you're kind of really just overpaying me. And he was like, well, I got the money. The money's not a problem for me, and you're doing me a favor, and I'd rather give it to you, and I don't care about that.
Nice.
And like, you're worth this much to me, so that's what I'm paying you. And
yeah.
I'm like, great. So I developed this relationship with this guy, and he is in this blues band, and he has a barn in the back of his property, and then in the second floor of this barn, he's built a club, and it's literally has like a bar and a stage and like seating and everything.
Cool.
And we set up this whole live recording rig for his band that was called Barn Jovi.
Oh, wow.
Because they were going to play a concert for their friends and record
Right.
it. And they get up there and do fucking Mustang Sally or whatever the fuck they're doing, all this shit like that. And it's all these old, like, retired lawyers and shit. Anyway, the guitar player for that band had just inherited like $41 million.
Oh, my God.
And bought a house that he didn't like and tore it down, and then was building a new house and wanted to have a studio in there. So this guy is like, or Denny was the guy that I was working for. Was
Okay.
like, well, Chris knows all about studios and recording, and he helped me set up everything in here. Like, he can help you with your spot. So this guy is like, okay, great. So then he hires me to like be a consultant on building his studio. Now, I had never actually built a studio or anything at this point. I kind of knew
Yeah.
a little bit about stuff, but I didn't really know. So anyway, he has this crew of Amish guys building his house in the studio.
Whoa.
And I become this like studio designer, audio consultant for him. And then
First studio is built by Amish guys.
Totally. So
This is still in Louisville?
yeah, this is still in Louisville. So what happened was I was doing this, and I was posting pictures of it to like Facebook or MySpace, whatever the fuck
Sure.
it was. And like Sam Velde, who's a friend who worked with Cold Sweat and was helping me with stuff, had saw those pictures. And when I was like, yeah, I got these 2 records I'm going to do when I get to LA, but I'm going to need something else. And he was like, well, you can build stuff, right? I saw your pictures. Like, you were like working on construction. I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, well, my friend that I skate with is a contractor, and he really needs an extra guy, and maybe I can link you up with him and you can do that. I was like, yeah, sure, totally. So he connects me with his friend Chad. And I was supposed to get to LA like a couple of weeks earlier than I actually did, because during the course of me building this project with this guy, I had started to study acoustic treatment and kind of figure out what that is and how to do it, and learning just some very early rudimentary things and materials to use, and talking to this guy about it. Now, even maybe a little bit less so now, but at that point in time, very few people knew anything about that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And especially in Louisville, they
Yeah.
knew nothing about like acoustic treatment. You start talking about this and they're like, well, what do I got to do that? So I had told him this should be part of the process. And he was like, I don't know. Like, how much is that going to cost? I don't want to fucking do that, whatever. And I'm like, well, we're going to do your control room. So I basically just build panels and treat his control room. And then I was finished that and was literally supposed to be like getting all my shit and driving to LA the next day and then starting to work with Chad. And then I had 2 records on deck.
Wow.
And then he is like, he gets in there and listens to some stuff. And he was like, we have to do the whole studio. And he was like, whatever you need, I don't care. I'll pay you. Just do it. And I just like did the math and I was like, well, I'm going to make like $6,000 in another week or 2 to fucking do the treatment for this guy's like studio. And I was like, oh, I got to do that. So I just don't sleep basically for 2 weeks.
Chris Owens special. Some things never change.
I prostitute myself to not that very sort of not attractive girl for her narcolepsy medicine.
Wow.
Anti-narcolepsy pills that she gives me because I like run out of Adderall and everything else I can find. It's like a dark path that I'm going down, but I gotta finish the studio. And
dude, this is nuts.
Yeah,
this is still the studio in Louisville.
Yeah,
okay.
but the Amish guys are building.
Okay.
So do that and literally hadn't slept in 2 weeks. Pack up all my stuff. And at that point, Chad's like, oh, are you coming or not? Because I need to find somebody else. I'm like, I'm going to be there. I drive 36 hours straight from Louisville to
savage.
LA. Now, I would have taken me a little bit less time, but I got stuck in a snowstorm in Flagstaff. And I have a Chevy Equinox and I'm pulling an 8x10 trailer. That was my old band trailer. Get to LA. Was going to be staying, crashing at Sam's house that it was actually he lived in with another one of my good friends. And it was in Los Feliz, right off Hillhurst. And so I pull into the Albertsons parking lot on Hillhurst.
Okay.
There with this trailer and stuff. And he's like not home, out doing stuff. He's like, oh, are you back? And I'm like, I literally haven't slept in like 2 fucking weeks and I'm dying. I'm just like, I just got to stay somewhere. I can't fall asleep in the parking lot here. So I call Laurel. And I'm like, hey, Laurel, I just pulled in town and like, could I, waiting for Sam to get home, can I just maybe go there and crash and like take a nap on your couch or something? And Laurel's like, oh yeah, well, I'm having a gathering. It was going to be only witches, but I think there's going to be one wizard there, so it should be cool if you come. And I'm like,
okay,
what the fuck? All right. So I go, and she lived in this house that I later lived in with her, but it was like right behind Little Joy, in Echo Park.
Okay.
Right off Sunset on Porsche, and pull up in there with this fucking trailer and walk in. Have you seen the Source family documentary?
No.
You should watch that.
Okay.
But it's this guy who is in the Source family documentary. And then she was also actually in that documentary. And he has this sort of group of women. And they had this thing they called the Cosmic Mafia, some like Silver Lake hippie witch stuff that they were getting into.
Whoa.
And I walk in this room and this guy's wearing this kind of like frilly shirt and like has some talismans and shit on. And there's all these women there that are these like high functioning professional women, right? Like one of them's an NPR reporter. Several of them are like in like higher up music executive, type jobs and stuff. And not full kooks,
Yeah.
But I walk in and this guy, they're all surrounded like in a semicircle listening to this guy talk. And he's talking about how what he does for a living is like exorcises spirits from people's houses.
Okay.
And like I'm very aspiritual in every respect. I'm a hardcore pragmatist, not religious in any capacity. That's a whole other podcast.
Yep.
But adamantly so. Anyway, I walk in and this guy's talking about how his clients hired him because they were doing a kitchen remodel. And things kept going wrong. Everything went wrong. Things broke. The contractor didn't show up on time, whatever, like couldn't get permits. All these things were going wrong. And then they knew that there had to be something, this underlying supernatural reason for this. So they hired this guy to come and evaluate what was wrong with the kitchen remodel. And he burns some sage and does a ceremony and determines that there's it was like a Indian burial ground. It was like the least original thing or whatever. There's like a spirit in the house, somebody buried there. So he has to do a ceremony to ask this spirit's permission because the spirit was upset because he didn't like the way they were remodeling the kitchen. And meanwhile, okay, so he's telling this. I want to do what you're doing right now, but I'm just watching. And then all of these, again, these women who were like very highly paid, high functioning professional people are like, and then what? And like, oh my gosh. And, Nick, like my whole life, like never had money of any sort. Always got by on next to nothing. And that was the first moment ever that I ever thought I can be rich. Here.
Yeah.
I can be rich. This is the place it can happen.
Yeah.
When I watched that go down. Like that. So.
That was after driving 36 hours.
Yeah. And having not slept for 2 weeks. All this like immediately nonstop.
Dude, what a fucking crazy entry to Los Angeles.
Yeah, so that's how it happened.
Okay. And so at that point, you finished the studio in Louisville.
Yeah.
And how did it turn out?
It turned out okay. There, like I never actually heard music happen there. I literally was hung the last acoustic panel in the booth there. It was like 2 a.m. I drove back to my grandparents' house where I had all my stuff at that point. Through the last things, and I had just been sleeping on a sleeping bag on the floor there. Took my stuff, took a shower, got in the car about 5 a.m. and started driving.
Wow.
And
fucking wild, dude. Holy shit. That's a lot. That's a lot. And so you move here, you go through the seance, getting the spirits out of the house, and how do things start to build from there? You're done, the band's done?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I originally, my thought was like, oh, I'm going to come to LA, and I had never recorded in someone else's studio. I'd only ever recorded in my studio with my gear, which was very limiting. And I was like, I want to get this. I thought I was still going to be engineering records, but I worked with weird, obscure punk bands that don't have any money. And in Louisville, Kentucky, where my rent at the time was $250 a month, my day rate for the studio and me as an engineer was $200 a day. And I was clearing like 150 something bucks out of that.
Yeah.
Basically. Cut to that point in LA, if you're like just working on punk records like I was, the day rate that bands have to spend is $200 a day.
Yeah. And the rent is
and
not
everything else
$250 a month.
Everything else is so exponentially expensive. And I started getting the sense, I was like, maybe. And then I was in this sort of mindset of my whole life. I felt like I had been sort of trying to force this square peg into a round hole. And I'm like, you know what? How about instead of doing that, I'm just whatever comes easy. And I was just like, rather than sitting here and try to force this thing that I want to be an engineer, like, I don't know, maybe I don't be. Maybe I want to do something different. And I had previously to that gone on this weird thing of just trying. I'm going to say yes, whatever somebody asks me money to do that it doesn't sound entirely miserable, or if it does, but it's enough money, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, maybe I'll get like a job in like a house, engineer in a studio or something or whatever. And then like at one point Laurel was managing Danzig and was his day to day. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll be like a guitar tech for Danzig or something like, had all these ideas of like where I might end up. But then I start working with Chad. One of my best closest friends, who's a general contractor. Like the very first day, it was the second day I was in LA. I got here on like Saturday night late. And then that Monday morning was on a job with Chad, and we were like installing this hardwood floor, which I had absolutely no idea how to do. Had never done that at all. And there was this guy, Andrew, who was sort of like the foreman, and there was only the three of us, so he was like the next guy up though. And I was working with him, and he was like, yeah, so you know how to do this, right? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I know like how we did it in Kentucky, but like, is there like something different you guys do it here in California? And he was like, oh yeah, well, oh cool, let me show you. So it's just like this, and I'm just watching, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I got it. And I just figure out building stuff really quick, and I didn't really love it at first, but I just realized I was good at it. And then I started to be a thing where it's like, oh, you know what? Like, it's 5:00 and we're done working.
Yeah.
The sun is still up. I can go out and do this stuff and have this like life. And, you know, previously to that, I was working in the fucking musician schedule and engineer schedule,
which is
like
24/7 essentially.
And like the idea that like there's a work day and it ends at 5 is insane.
Yeah. I haven't had that since high school.
Yeah. And I was like, wait a minute, this is nice.
Yeah.
And so I kind of started thinking, I was like, you know what, maybe I went back to this thing. It's like, does that make me happy?
Yeah.
And I was like, no. And then I started to think about it. I was like, oh my God, like, do I ever really want to be sitting there editing tom hits for 12 fucking hours in a dark room ever again in my entire life?
Fuck no.
I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
And so I really only worked like for Chad for about 2 months. And then he got offered to build a home studio. And it was a guy he went to high school with. And he was just like, you know what? Like, it's a shoestring budget. Oh, in the meantime, no one ever figured out that I had no idea what I was doing. I like totally was able to play it off and then learn while I was doing it in a way that no one ever knew that I had no idea what I was doing. And years later, I told these people that, and they're all good friends of mine now. And they were just like, well, I mean, whatever, you did the job. And yeah. He was like, it's a home studio. I don't really know shit about that. That's kind of your thing. You know about that. It's a shoestring budget. It's only $10,000. You just want to take the job. Now, at the time, $10,000 was a fucking 5-figure number.
Yeah.
Which was not something that happened to me in my world. And I'm like, $10,000, fucking A.
Yeah.
And of course, it should have, in hindsight, should have been $110,000.
Yeah. That's the best realization when you come into your first what you think was a big paycheck, and then you realize like, fuck me, I did not get paid enough to do all this shit that I just got paid what I thought was a significant amount of money to do, and fuck, I'm stuck here.
So I do that job, and I go to look at the job, and I knock on the door, and he was like, you're Chris, Chad's guy? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you look familiar. I was like, you look familiar. And I realized I knew him.
No way.
It's Phil Vera, and my band, Lords, had played with his band Crom, not in LA though, like in like Portland and I think a couple in Seattle and a couple of other places on tour before. And he was Chad's high school friend. So it was like this total weird small world thing, which is, happens all the time.
Yeah.
Especially here, I feel like.
It really is nuts here.
Yeah. So anyway, I built his home studio, and I'm thinking, this is cool. It's going to be this cool one-off thing I did. I built a studio. And that point too, I'm like researching, like learning more about soundproofing and stuff as I go. And as we're doing it, I do all of the work physically myself. And then basically I'm at a party while I'm in the middle of doing that, talking to some girls, and one of them's like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, right now I'm building a recording studio. I'm like, oh, cool. And then a couple of days later, I get a phone call from a number I don't know. And I pick it up, and this guy is like, hey, is this Chris Owens? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, so you build recording studios? And I'm like, yes. And he was like, yeah, well, my the girl that cuts my hair gave me your number. And as it turns out, it was the roommate of the girl that I had been talking to. And like somehow or another, like she'd been privy to that conversation that girl met a guy that was building a recording studio. The next day she's cutting this dude's hair, and he's like, yeah, I've got a new spot. Like, do you know anybody that builds recording studios? And she's like, actually. And so this guy calls me. And then I go to look at a spot. It was in Atwater Village on Casitas. And there was another guy there giving a competing bid. That guy was Dominic.
No way.
Schreiner, yeah. because they were literally across the hall from the first Pro Audio LA office.
Okay. I remember that place.
And they were just on the, like, literally catty corner on the other side.
Okay.
And so I walk in there, and Dominic's like, what do you want to do here? And they were also like, so you have experience doing like a 5.1 mix room and a post-production facility screening room? I'm like, absolutely. Of course I didn't, but we figure this stuff out. So Dominic's like, yeah, this is minimum 25 grand. And again, realistically, knowing what I know now, that should have been like 250 grand.
Yeah.
But he's like, this is minimum 25 grand. And these dudes were like, $25,000. We don't have that kind of money. And they were like, I was like, how much money do you got? And they go, we have $5,000.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, and there was 5 of them. They're like, we will all work. We'll work. We'll do whatever we need to do. And I'm like, okay, let me see what I can do. So I get on Craigslist, and I used to be the master of this. And I don't know that if I just lost my touch or if things have just changed, but I find these guys that were probably selling shit that fell off a truck, but like, they had like 4x12 sheets of drywall for like $6 a piece, and
nice.
like all kinds of shit. And then I get some green glue and all this other stuff, and I source all this stuff, and it's like $2,000 for like this. And they were like, it doesn't have to be nice, doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be better than what it is. So I source all this stuff and find like about $2,000 in materials, and I tell them, I'm like, all right, here's the deal. Or it was like $3,000, I think, ish in materials. Like, it's this much in materials. You get me and my tools for 2 weeks. Get $1,000 a week. Nice. And then either it gets done, or you all 5 have to work. It gets done, or you got to pay more money. Or I walk and you figure it out. But
sure.
this is what you get for that amount of money. And they're like, great. So we all work like 18 hours a day. We get it done. It looks good enough. Works good enough. And I mean, for fucking $5,000, it's amazing. And so Dominic comes in there to talking about selling them some gear, and he's like, how in the fuck did you do this for $5,000? So then they start hiring me to do builds for the Pro Audio LA stuff.
Okay.
But simultaneously to that, one of my good friends from Louisville, he had been working with Diplo pretty much from day one.
Okay.
He met up with some of those guys.
From there, or is that no?
No.
Okay.
He was going to college in Vancouver and met Paul DeVreau, who was involved with like Mad Decent in the very early stages of that stuff. And then Paul introduced him to Wes, and he was like with Wes pretty much from day one.
Okay.
And they both
what a
moved.
fucking journey that must have been.
They both moved to LA literally just a few weeks before I did. So they had their first studio was also in Atwater. It was like on Larga above the Wells Fargo. And it was in the spot where the Beastie Boys studio used to be when they were in LA.
Yep.
They had like the half basketball court. But Diplo's studio was in what used to be like the lobby to that. And it was this weird, awkward L-shaped room that sounded like dog shit. And Derek, who's my friend who was his engineer, Derek Allen, had been telling him, he's like, my friend Chris like builds studios and does acoustic treatment. You really should get him in here to do something. And at this point, Wes had become a millionaire on making music on a laptop in a bedroom.
Yeah.
And he's like, why do I need that? It's fine or whatever. It's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And but right around that same time, I started working with the Pro Audio LA guys. They had like somebody come in there that they were supposed to work with. I don't know who it was, but they come in and they look at the spot and they were like, we're not fucking working in here. This is not a studio. And they just left. And then Wes just like, hey, Derek, call your guy Chris. So I start doing the like work with like Pro Audio LA guys, and then I start doing the stuff with Diplo and that crew at the same time. And then from here, then it just sort of branches out from there. So then on this crew, they end up linking me up with Mike Karen. And I did like some studios for Atlantic and APG, and then like all the APG writers, and then that went on this whole world,
tree,
and then just everything just starts snowballing from there. And
that's amazing.
And as people know here, like it is Dominic is how I actually met Nick. And what's funny is Dominic had like commissioned me to build some like gobo panel things.
Yep.
And I did those, and no idea what it was for. And then it was some time, couple years even after that.
Yeah.
I get a call from Nick, and I come here to this very building upstairs and to look about, doing treatment or something. And I walk in and I see those, and I'm like, at this deja vu moment, and I'm like, those are really familiar. And I don't then I'm like, oh fuck, I made those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fucking wild, man.
Yeah.
That's a wild whole
Yeah.
process. And for me to even connect into that in the slightest way is fucking incredible.
Yeah.
So at that point, where's like, is it just every studio gets incrementally improved? How are you studying? Like, how did you arrive at like the knowledge and the just...
Yeah, so and especially in the very early stages, there was a lot of like experimenting and trial and error, and there was like things that we were like I was discovering worked, and and really to this day, there's things. It's like it's always an evolution, and you're always thinking about Well, at first it was really about function, and then like started to. And right about the time I was doing this, I think there was a lot of changes happening in the world of music. And there started to be this like different types of needs, because it wasn't like this traditional thing of like a band recording in a studio.
Yeah.
Most people weren't doing that.
Yeah.
And there was a sort of evolution of like, the producers and songwriters wanting their own spaces. Because instead of renting out fucking Sunset Sound or fucking wherever for however long, it's like you're losing all this money, and then you can just have a home studio and then do that. So this home studio world was really starting to kind of blow up around that point in time.
Yeah.
Or get into a sort of a different level, and there was like different needs where it was more like writing and producer type needs, versus this traditional like tracking,
big band,
big band
orchestra
type stuff.
or any of that kind of stuff.
And like I think I just kind of happened on this wave and I realized there's different types of things that people needed that were different. And part of the thing with the writing space too was also like how it looked and how it felt. And that was like not necessarily the same as this traditional aspect of like going into a studio. And it started to shift away from rarely being about pure acoustics and also be a lot about vibe. Yeah. And so what I kind of became a designer in that aspect, and then started thinking about things in a different term. Yeah. And like thinking about how to make this look really cool. Yeah. And focusing on that as much as I did how it sounds and everything else, so that trying to, have both function and fashion. Yeah. But, and in the realm of all of that, there was a lot of like, reading and studying, and there's lots of different opinions about different things. And a lot of times, and actually me and Dominic did some stuff where we were doing like tests of acoustic materials, and we would just buy stuff in different types of materials and then do some sort of empirical testing in the studio with it. And we're like, okay, well, if we have an untreated room and we put these things in it, and then we do some playback, and then that gives us this result, and we put these other things in there, and then that gives us this result. And some of the earlier projects too, I started experimenting with different materials and stuff for isolation, and finding things that I found to work better than others and using those things. Yeah.
That's so fucking cool, man. That's amazing. I mean, your studios, especially the more I see now, like that, the artistic vision and the vibe of what you're creating is like the most exciting studios I've ever seen in like the history of any studio I've ever seen.
Again, flattery will get you everywhere.
But it's just genuinely, man, like I look at the shit you're doing and it's so fucking cool. I mean, I like absolutely love what we created on like talk about maximum shoestring budget. I mean, I fucking tell everybody about you because you've been like a lifeline keeping this place alive through having zero money, having a fucking roof collapse from rain problems, and wanting to grow way bigger than any money I could afford to grow. And like, shit, dude, I'm literally thankful for that every single day. So for me, it's like, and we built like to that point, like my dream fucking place, like I still walk upstairs and I'm just like, I can't fucking believe this is like mine, at this point. And seeing how the new projects you're working on are like every single time I'm like, fuck, I wish I had money to like build a new place, have Chris come in, do that shit. Like, how can we put this together to the point where it's like, man, we got a real budget to like be like, Chris, you got the unlimited fund, and like we got 7 rooms we want to build, and like, you know, we can go crazy because just
one of these days.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, for me, I toggle with like that starts to become a bit of like what you were saying with like the last like 7 months have been like the worst 7 months for me in my life. And that prior to that was COVID, and still kind of had like a little bit of an overlap. And a lot of the conversation of, is this making me happy? What's like the deal that I'm really like doing this for, and where am I at? And engineering specifically was like such a crazy rabbit hole that prior to COVID, I would literally be working like, it could be 12 to 20 hours a day. And some of the 20-hour days could be week-long runs. Yeah. And you just like get fucking lost, like your head's down, you know? And anytime I would talk to you, you'd be doing the same shit in the construction world and still producing records. Yeah. Are you still actively creating music, or has it really become this full-time gig as design and construction?
I mean, so there was one record, the last record I worked on, and to kind of rewind a little bit back into like, I play guitar every day.
Okay.
I still love making music, and I don't like hate recording. I'm not like over it in a sense, but I did realize, and this is like corny as fuck, but I saw this like Richard Branson quote on like a fucking meme, and it's one of these things where it's like, you know, with any kind of, doesn't matter what it is, like do the parts that you love doing and then pay someone else to do the rest.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wait a minute, yeah. And I realized that really what I want to do in music when I work on music in any other capacity, especially if, you know, with any kind of other band, is in the like a producing role and not being an engineer. And like maybe like a hands-on producer, but not like I don't ever want to sit at a desk and press space bar ever again. Yeah. I don't ever want to fucking edit tom hits. I don't want to fucking go through here and like comp all the like I don't want to fucking do that technical parts of that. Like I like the idea of like the big picture thing. I like getting sounds and working on that front of it, and then, you know, and also like working on like arrangements and stuff like that with bands. And like that's fun. That's like the creative part of it to me. And then the technical like grunt work part of it, I'd want to have nothing to do with.
Yeah.
And so I had this band Culture Abuse, and they were friends of mine, and I really liked the band. They're an Epitaph, and I had demoed some stuff for them, and they loved it, and they were like, you got to do our record. You got to do our record on Epitaph. And I was like, dude, I can't do a punk record. I've got like real shit going on. And they had a budget, and it was like bigger than any band I've ever worked with, but not enough to make it worth it for me to stop my life for a month and make this record. And so I was like, all right, well, here's the deal. Like, I'll just be producer on it. Yeah, I get full producer credits. And I did the math, and like they basically were like, they had $5,000 they can give me. And then I was like, okay, your last record sold 10,000 copies ish, and I'm like, what do I get off of that? You give me 20 points on the record, and then $5,000, and I'll do it.
Yeah.
We agree to that. Everything's cool.
Sweet.
We go and start making the record. They wanted to record it at 64 Sound in Highland Park. I did not like that studio. It was like brutally dead sounding in there, and their control room was fucked. It's like not even a room. It's a corner. It doesn't even have a door. It's got this big open like hallway on the sides, whacked, and like they had this MCI desk that I just didn't love, and like nothing. They like liked the vibe of it, and at the time, and when they went in there, and but we start working this record. It turns out pretty cool, and like we were going for this kind of like almost like punk Amy Winehouse, a little more punk, like where it's kind of this like 60s soul sort of production, but like a little bit slicker, and like but for like a punk band. And like a pop punk band, but not like pop punk. I'm gonna explain it anyway. Pretty stoked on it and pretty proud of it too. like the way everything's turning out, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be cool. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe this will be launch this other world of like getting into like actually making records again. And it was February 2020.
Oh, nice.
And COVID happens, everything gets locked down.
Yeah.
And then they were mixing at this studio, which again, despite being producer, was not my choice, but it was a friend of the singers, and it's like up in the Bay Area, like Palo Alto, I think. But originally I was supposed to fly up there with them, and I just figured, okay, I'll go out there for the first few days. We'll kind of get like the meat and potatoes, everything going, and then they can go through everything else and just send me, and I'll have notes and revisions. But they had there had been somebody in the studio with COVID, so they locked the studio down. So like, we're still just do this, but it's going to have to be 100% remote. And that ended up being this like nightmare process. And like,
I avoided anybody who wanted to do any work like that.
And as COVID. Like trying to describe things like on mixed notes when you're even talking about shaping the basic sounds of the record is so arduous and everything. And
it's like a 10x to 20x time frame that you have to now expand your work to.
Yeah, exactly. And there was like a day where it was 16 hours of back and forth to get like one song to like kind of a working point. We're like, okay,
brutal.
Great, like 13 more to go. But anyway, in the process of this happening, the singer gets Me Too'd, and in the way that we won't get into that, but it was right around the Burger Records thing. I don't know if any of that was on your radar.
No.
This whole thing happened. They weren't on Burger, but they were sort of very loosely peripheral, like related to that, and more or less the singer has cerebral palsy in the band, and there was a girl who claimed that he had used his disability to manipulate her and guilt her into having sex with him.
Whoa.
Now, the thoughts on the validity of that, it's a whole other conversation. But anyway, that happened, and because of just sort of the climate of everything, the band just imploded. Like, the other guys in the band were like, you know what, we just don't want to have anything to do with this, because our name's on it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like, what's true, what's not true, what
it's
really
just
happened.
Tainted at this point.
Yeah, it's just like it's tainted, and then the record never came out. Epitaph actually was still going to put the record out, and then just like the band just didn't want to, and then so it just never happened, just evaporated.
It's so wild how things go like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have all these expectations of things, and you're seeing things go, and then like you literally just like blow a tire, or in that case you fucking flip the car over, and you're just like, well, I'm glad I got it alive, but like, my car's gone.
Yeah.
And like, what do I do next? Because I needed the car.
Yeah. Luckily for me, it wasn't so much the thing that I had plenty of things to do next.
Totally.
And,
no, for sure.
And but it was it was like sort of disappointing to be like put all this work into something that like, especially when I kind of had stopped doing that, and then now it's like, oh, this is going to be the triumphant return.
Yeah.
And it's this thing that you're actually proud of, and then just maybe no one will hear it ever. I don't know.
I can relate. I've had many, 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 many of those in my 14 years of doing this. And a lot of the times I've tried to basically give everything, whether it was financially or just energy that I had to an artist, a project, trying to put something out, flying people down here with like literally the last few $100s I had after getting like fucked over from some other situation. And working on songs to have somebody just be like, oh man, like that contract that we like you sent me and we agreed to over the phone, like you told you we'd sign when we got to LA, like we're not going to sign that. Like we think that all these points are off. And I'm just like, dude, you told me on the phone before I bought you a fucking ticket.
Jesus,
like, this is all good. It's like your birthday night. I didn't want to like harp on like,
getting
you got to fucking sign this.
Yeah.
And like, we're all just like fucking excited. I'm bringing Grammy winning producers from last year in to come make songs for these guys, paying these guys out of pocket, like all this shit. And then all of a sudden they're just like, nah. And I'm like, dude, nah, I fucking flew you down here. The three of you were staying in my apartment. Like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
And that shit, like when you're at like your end of your bandwidth, and it's just like, fuck, you just keep trucking, Music is like painfully addictive and brutal and punishing. And it's also like the fucking best thing in the world when you create a song or a record or a project and
absolutely
you bond to it. And it's just like, man, I live for that. It's very fucking exciting. So that works out or that doesn't work out, but you're also in the middle of fucking COVID. And was it back to building projects?
Yeah, and that never stopped for us at all. Like
It's
that
just
actually, like
out
yeah,
working on music, but the team is still
yeah,
constructing.
oh yeah, and
Yeah.
like I was, we were in the middle of stuff, and that I was working in the studio with them, and sometimes I was working on design stuff and coordinating everything from the studio, and we had builds going the whole time. When COVID happened, we actually there were like a couple of projects that went away, but we got like 5 more because at that time everyone was doing like fucking Twitch, and they were like, we got to have a room to do Twitch in.
Yeah.
And like
It needs to look like this.
yeah, and like so that became this extra thing that not only made up for the things that disappeared, but actually gave us more work on top of that.
Yeah.
And it's just been completely nonstop ever since.
Amazing, man. I think, I don't know if it was right around that time, or maybe it was just before. Was it 2019 when you moved into is it the facility you have now, or you already moved again?
Oh yeah, where my shop is.
Yeah.
That was 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had already gotten like the roots into that place.
Yeah.
Sick. Still in the same place?
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And back to the fun shit.
Mhm.
Are you still doing anything monster truck? I know you're doing off-road related things and wrestling and
All of the above. So, let's to get away from music and talk about the other things, because, and again, not to disparage the musical world and life too much, but when I spent literally from the time I was like 14 years old until like again like 32 or so, that's the only thing I didn't do anything else.
that's
And
crazy.
then-
You said that, dude. I started at 15. I'm 32 now, and
Yeah.
I literally feel like that's all I've fucking done.
Yeah, and then just so I'm 43,
Yeah.
and like later on in life, you start to realize it's like, oh wait, there's other stuff.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of like a hobby that wasn't that music related before was just like,
No way. No time for
yeah,
it.
how could that even happen? So I accidentally got into truck stuff and off-roading, and that's kind of my new thing. And now that I'm not spending money on microphones, I'm spending money on my truck.
Yeah.
I have a like fucking $85,000 now Toyota Tacoma that is
Crazy.
like double what I paid for the actual truck into the truck and stuff. But
What do you put into it?
well, it's got like all new suspension, like larger wheels than it should have. Lots of different stuff, some technical oriented things, a lot of money in lights. But everything has a purpose, and it's sort of very similar in a way to like a studio, and everything has a purpose. And when I'm talking to like my grandmother who I grew up with, and she was like, well, do you have to have that on the truck? It's like the same conversation she used to have with me. She was like, I mean, does that other microphone really sound any different? I'm like, yes, Grandma, it does. And but it's kind of like that, but now with truck stuff. And I the way this got started, a few years ago, I think it was around 2017, I think it was Christmas break, and the handful of years I was in LA, I worked all through Christmas and New Year's, did not have any day off, and didn't have family here. It wasn't like going anywhere. I just just fucking worked, and I was like, I'm not doing that. And it's a good time. Ironically, a lot of clients, especially when you're doing like home stuff, they're all going out of town. So like,
Sure.
hey, you know what would be great? So like, we're gonna be gone like from like the 23rd through the 3rd.
Yeah.
It would be awesome if you could just kind of knock out everything else while we're gone and we come back. And
Of course.
I'm like,
Sounds
like-
awesome.
yeah, and I'm like,
I'd love to go on a vacation and fucking come back and my whole thing is just ready
yeah,
for me.
and then and so for a while I was just like, yes, and then I was like, oh, fuck you, I want to go do shit too.
Yeah.
And that's just a good time because absolutely no one like is going to be upset when you're like, I'm not working from Christmas to New Year's.
Yeah.
Like, sorry.
Yeah.
You have a license to do that. So I did that, and it's this first span of days where I had nothing to do, and I'm like, what do I do? I was like, I don't know. And I'm just like, I want to go somewhere, and I get out my phone, and I go to Google Maps.
This one.
This one right here. Get it on Google Maps, and I just zoom out, and I'm looking at it. And I'm just looking, I'm like, what looks cool? And then I start looking and I see these like sand dunes, like down around here, like on the other side of the Salton Sea. And I'm like, oh, sand dunes. What the fuck is that? I'm going to go see what these sand dunes are because I saw them from space.
Wow.
So
I like the way you think.
I had a truck. I had a 2-wheel drive Tacoma at the time. And I drive down, and that's Glamis in the Imperial Dunes. I knew nothing about it, but I drive down there, and I just look at it. I'm like, holy shit, it looks like the Sahara. Fuck yeah. The Sahara with a bunch of Monster Energy bros just running around. And I get stuck in the sand. I literally just pull off in the shoulder to take a picture, and I get stuck. And I'm like, oh, motherfucker. I narrowly escape because I had a packing blanket in the back, and then did some stuff that later I would come to find out is actually like the proper standard procedure to get unstuck. But
Sure.
I had no idea at the time. It was just like, how do I use the things that I have? Which in a way goes back to like this DIY ethic. And I guess in one respect, to tie into, so is there anything about growing up in Kentucky and Louisville that was good? And maybe it was when you come from a sense of like never having the right tools available to you, and then always trying to figure out how to make something happen from nothing because that was your only choice.
Sure.
And then in music, the same. And then like, on touring in a punk band is absolute insanity. And the things that you have to like figure out how to do. At one point I remember going across this bridge in Canada to Prince Edward Island, and all of a sudden I started hearing this like, and like our brake pad had fell apart, and our brakes were like literally falling off in the back brake drum. We get across this bridge, and it's like the second longest bridge I think in North America, except for like the Keys or whatever. And like I cut a piece of a chain link fence, and I'm able to fix our brakes enough, and that lasts the rest of the tour, and like do weird shit like that. But so there's this sort of challenge in sort of off-roading that's kind of like that sometimes, where you're like, how do I make this work? And,
Totally.
And there's like this thought process of like lots of creative problem solving.
Yeah.
But in this respect that I had never, had never done before in this other outlet. But anyway, I get unstuck. I then start getting a little bit more adventurous when I start trying to go places. And I see these like paths, but I know I can't go in them in my truck. And I'm like, man, one of these days I'll get a 4x4 and go there. And then it was November 2019, and I went to the Grand Canyon for Thanksgiving. And also when I moved to LA, I had made a vow to never see snow again. I fucking hate winter. I hate snow. I don't think it's cute. Like I worked outside loading airplanes in the winter.
Yeah.
And Louisville's just fucking like dirty, and it's fucking wet and brutal when you're like people who like snow, they're like, oh, we went to Aspen and we were Big Bear in the lodge and sitting in front of a cozy fire and
not like, loading UPS.
Yeah, dude, it fucking
Kentucky.
sucks. Anybody who's ever worked outside in the winter, it's just like, it's brutal, and you literally just become enraged when you hear people talk about like that. And so I was like, no snow. But then I was like, it's been a long time. I haven't had snow. I haven't really been cold. It's like, maybe I just need to be prepared for it. You know what? Here's my chance. And I knew that it was going to snow in the Grand Canyon. And I was like, it said only maybe 5 inches. I'm like, 5 inches, whatever. That's no big deal. It's like, I went and I, on my way out, stopped at Dick's Sporting Goods. I was like, I'll get some like winter clothes there. They didn't really have any winter clothes. So I got these like weird like workout tights because I didn't have thermals or something like that. I was like, I'll put these under my jeans. It'll be fine. And I got dude Uggs, because that's all that they had, like as far as winter boots. I'm like, fuck it, whatever. And so I'm wearing my dude Uggs and these like weird workout tights, like compression tights or some shit for like, and I get there and the first day is not that bad. And then it was the night before Thanksgiving. It was like the Wednesday. So then Wednesday night, and then it was supposed to snow like maybe 5 inches the next day. And I was like, cool, well, I'll get up. It'll be kind of maybe a little bit of snow on the ground. And then my plan was I'm going to drive south to Oregon Pipe, where it's going to be like fucking 90. And that'd be great. I would have had I would have seen snow briefly and been beautiful in the Grand Canyon or whatever. Anyway, I'm in this, and I got this bitchin' cabin that was in Grand Canyon Village, but literally like about 50 foot from the edge of the canyon.
No way.
And I sort of lucked out and got it. It was like $150 or something.
No
like,
way.
Fucking A. So I wake up in the middle of the night, and it's like freezing cold. And there'd been a heater on, but the heater wasn't on. I'm like, oh, that's fucking weird. Heater's off. I don't know, whatever. And I just piled some more blankets on. And then I wake up really early, and I was like, good. I'm gonna go outside. Maybe there'll be a little bit of snow, and I'll drive to Southern Arizona. It's going to be great. And I hear these people talking, and I hear this couple arguing. And the guy is like, well, what am I supposed to do? I couldn't even open the damn door. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, well, where are we going to go anyway? There's 4 feet of snow, and the highways are closed. And I was like, no fucking way. And I look out, and there's 4 feet of snow. And my truck is like completely engulfed.
Oh, no.
Everything. And I'm like, fuck. And there's no power.
Oh, no.
So I go out and I like try to dig myself out, and I spend hours and hours and hours trying to dig myself out, and I can't get out. And there's like, it's just snowpocalypse mayhem. Everyone's stuck. The freeways are shut down. There's no electricity. Now, if I had like the super truck I have now, I would have been fucking out of there like nothing. But anyway, there's
Still
a
2-wheel at that
like,
time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There
not going
was lots of things of like high comedy. There was like a fire happened somewhere because somebody was like had a gas stove and caught one of their cabins on fire.
Wow.
The fire truck tries to go there. The fire truck gets stuck in the snow behind my truck as I'm trying to dig myself out. I asked them if I could have a shovel, and they wouldn't let me have one. I had to steal a shovel when no one was looking. And then I end up like everything that I hate about winter. I'm like working the whole time.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I'm digging it out, it's just like snowing more, and I'm sweating, and my sweat is freezing.
Yep,
and it's just like, I'm just like, I hate life. But at that point, I was like, never again. So it was actually February 2020, right before the apocalypse. For my birthday, I bought myself a new truck and traded in that one, and got a new truck right before it became impossible to get vehicles.
Sweet timing.
While you still had a thing.
Yeah.
Got a really good deal on it. And then the apocalypse happened, and it was like bars were closed, and like you couldn't really go out on the weekends. So I just started going out on these off-road adventures, and I would literally just find tire tracks in the middle of the desert somewhere from space, and then go there.
No way.
And exploring, and then just got deep into that world, and now that's my like kind of my main hobby.
Sick.
You can see my Instagram at Black Truck Stuff, which that name was a joke because when I got the first black truck, like, and that was the first time I'd ever gotten a new vehicle. When I got that truck, we did a job for Disney and got some money, and I was like, I'm gonna get a new vehicle. Well, the part I left out is that I played chicken with the Sparklets water truck and lost in my other vehicle.
That doesn't sound like a good situation.
And walked away from it miraculously.
Wow.
It totally accordioned.
Wow.
But
like a head-on, or like were you behind?
Head on.
Yeah. Oh my God. Fuck.
And this actually, you talked about your heart attack, and like this thing at that point in time, I was like super stressed as work, as you do, and like you have all these projects, and Disney hit me up to do this thing, and they of course had like, these, we could only work like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and like I had to work on weekends, and they were really like stressing about getting this stuff done. So I was like stressing about all this stuff, and like, and you were running all these multiple jobs, and like, there's a thing that I end up doing. It's like, I feel like all day long, all I'm doing in the back of my mind constantly while trying to do everything else is make lists and keep track of stuff. That's like calculating in the back of my mind.
Sure.
And just to make sure I don't forget anything. And it's really hectic, and it's really kind of like almost like subconsciously stressful.
I know whether it's sessions or notes or things for a song or clients or scheduling or sending an invoice is literally like this fucking, I've everywhere mental to-do list. I literally have fucking post-it notes everywhere, upstairs, downstairs. I have notes listed in my phone. Like it's the constant like ticking of like, oh fuck, dude, this guy needed a file, this guy needed a session, this guy, and I'm just like, fuck, I gotta like, that's all gotta go. I'm getting like the critical shit off my list, and I'm fucking out of here tomorrow. Yeah. Well, like I'm driving, and I remember just like I'm looking both hands on the wheel, looking straight ahead, going to the Home Depot, and I'm just like thinking about all the things I have to do. And all of a sudden I like come to, and my hood is right here. Oh my God. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I don't recall the accident happening. I had just turned in straight up in front of this Sparklets truck. Wow. And just fucking, it clipped me, knocked me across. All these people are running out. And I try to open the door, and the door doesn't open, and the window's shattered, airbags out and everything. And I'm like, oh, fuck this. I'm like, I get out like Dukes of Hazzard style, and everybody's running up to me. They're like, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm fine.
And then
I feel like there's
like
an uh-oh moment. About
well, the EMS comes and they're like, we need to take you to hospital. I was like, no, I'm totally fine. And probably wasn't. I get home and we were just starting a new project the very next day. And it was for this dude, Justin Franks, DJ Frankie. I don't know if you like know any of his stuff or not, but we were starting his studio literally the very next day, and my guys were at the shop making stuff, and I'm like, yeah, so this just happened. And it's another picture, and like, oh fuck, so I guess we're like not working. I was like, no, you're finishing work today, and we're there at fucking 6 a.m. tomorrow. And they're like, how are you gonna get a car? I was like, oh, don't worry about that. Like, we're starting the job. And like, I think I was just like all adrenaline at that point. Get home, and I remember like taking off my clothes, and I just had a black seatbelt bruise, just black,
Across.
like all the way across me.
Brutal.
And then the next morning, I woke up in excruciating pain.
Yeah.
But still got up, fucking went to Enterprise, got a fucking car, got everything. We went and started the job and just suffered through it.
Fucking crazy.
Then I ended up getting the new truck at that point. Yeah, that was the truck thing. And then that's snowballed into the 4x4 truck life. Oh, well, when I got the truck, I was like, got the new black truck, and it was like the black car, and like it was like fancy and new, and all the guys were like, damn, you got that, you're like doing that black truck stuff now. And like, that was sort of the joke. And then we had there's a time code software that we use, and when I would have guys do like sort of personal shit for me, the job code was black truck stuff, and they're like, oh, we're doing black truck stuff today. And
nice. I like how that built out.
Yeah.
I had two crazy situations. One, on a quick note, I used to be really into like the what's it called? Like rally car driving. So I had a WRX STI in high school that like I scored from this dude that had put like a full roll cage and like carbon fiber front end and like all this shit. And I same thing, changed the suspension, roll or like the sway bars, everything, like decked the car out, and it was already pretty modified. And I would go like up into the mountains with my friends, and we'd be watching all these like crazy like Kent Block like rally videos, and you know they have like the co-pilot sitting next to him. We just go off into these like dirt road trails and just be like fucking hauling ass, and you know just like throwing the car around. And like within 2 weeks we're up in like the mountains, and I just remember hitting like this bump and like just nose dove my car into the ground, and I was just like, what the fuck? But that was so fun. Oh my God. You know, so it's like I very much love, you know, from a little bit of a different aspect, because I like, for me, it's more of like a speed thing. I like that a lot. And when I first moved here, I had seen a movie with my brother and his roommate at the time, Tim, and we got out of this movie that was like all about fate and all this thing. It was a late night movie. We finished at like 1:30, and I'm driving them back home in Venice, and like out of the like corner of my eye, I just see like this big SUV not stopping for their red light, and like literally tap my brake like right at the second where like it would have just been like the full blown T-bone, and like the guy just caught like the front of my car and like spun me out and whole crazy thing, and then he just fucking took off.
Oh wow.
And like it was the wildest fucking just what the fuck moment, you know. And like same thing, police came, and we like tried to, you know, nobody knew what to do, and the guy just fucking got away with it. And you know my car was fucking mangled, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna drive home, you know. And then like woke up the next day, like literally my whole shit like was just because it was just like a smash, you know. And I was just like, what the fuck just happened? And then more recently, in like the heart attack situation, I went to like go get checked out at an urgent care on like Saturday morning at like the last day of March or first day of April. And I had a producer that I just started managing from the Netherlands in town, and he had set up a session with one of my favorite artists now, this guy named Reggie, who's like, to me, like top 3 all time. Like I fucking love this guy. I've worked with him a lot for the last couple of years. And I'm like thinking, my energy's like not really feeling right. I feel weird. I'm going to like go get checked out. And like after all these sessions and all this other shit that's been going on, filming podcast episodes that week, like Saturday morning I wake up like, my energy's like still not back. And I go into the urgent care room, and the guy's like hooking me up to the EKG, and he's like, oh, this is weird. Like the machinery's like must be off, you know? And I'm like thinking to myself, like, why the fuck am I here then? Because like I
Yeah.
came here to get this test done. And the guy's like, yeah, we're gonna try another test. We'll move the leads around. We'll do all this stuff. I'm like, okay. And he's like, we're gonna do some blood work. And I was like, okay, cool. And they like 3 different times they're like, oh, this is really weird. Like it's not calibrated right or something. And my dumbass is not thinking like, oh, this is serious. I'm just thinking like, well, I should get the fuck out of here because like this is broken clearly, you know. And so literally the guy walks back in and just looks at me in the eye and he's like, you had a heart attack and I called an ambulance and you need to go to the emergency room right now. And I was just like, what? Like, I mean, I felt like I literally was on that couch when I had a heart attack. I felt it. I like had the whole arm, the chest, the stomach, the whole deal, and like did nothing like a fucking idiot. And anyway, fast forward to back to that. And like in 2 minutes, they're giving me like nitrogen pills, Advil, blah, 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 put me on a fucking thing and wheel me into the back of an ambulance. And I'm supposed to be here like 2 hours like later for the session with Amara and Reggie. And I call Amara from the fucking like sitting on the gurney thing, getting wheeled into an ambulance. Like, hey man, I'm not going to make it today. This is how you can get into the studio remotely. You could turn this stuff on. You guys can have access to this stuff. Like, hopefully I'll be there in a little bit. And then just like hung up the phone. And then I was in like an emergency room for like 7 hours, x-rays and tests and blah, blah, blah. No phone service. And those guys are just like freaking out. Like, where the fuck are you? You know? And literally finally I got like word out like, hey man, like I'm not going to be in tonight. And like stayed in the hospital and, you know, like literally the weekend there and came back out like no health insurance, fucking $60,000 bill, like the works, you know, and like just was like, okay, like if I needed any more of a reason to slow down and like think about what's going on in life, I got like the, hey buddy, if you don't, this could be it.
Absolutely. And you know, I realize, and again, it's like this cliche that you hear, but it's actually totally true. It's that, you know, if you don't take time to make something happen, it's like there's never going to be a convenient time to stop.
For sure.
You have to like make time to stop. You have to tell people no. You have to slow down, because if you don't actively do that, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And
then one day you're either too old to have fun or you die.
Yeah.
And you just like, I trying to find that balance, and I don't think I'm like fully on that balance yet, but like, you know, when I first moved here, I was on this marathon work thing and trying to create something new. And I started a new business. I was growing a lot, and there's a lot of work. That's involved.
You have to do that.
You have to do what you have to do. But then after a certain point, you know, like for the accident was a little bit of a thing. So I was like, wait a minute, like I shouldn't be like so preoccupied with like thinking about like if we have enough nails for this thing that I'm like zoning out and fucking wrecking into a
fucking semi-truck.
Yeah. Like that's like I need to be more present.
Yeah.
And like maybe that means like
a
little more zen about some things, and like everybody wants everything yesterday and for nothing.
Yeah. 100%.
That's never going to change, but that doesn't mean you have to accommodate that. You can do what's reasonable, and you know, and then at the time, like make time to experience life while you have it.
Yeah.
Cause you know,
it goes quick, man.
It goes quick, and then there's one.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
So cars became a hobby, and wrestling's still a thing. I remember looking at your Instagram random times and just being like, dog, where are you? You're at like some luchador, crazy little people fucking jumping off ropes.
Yeah,
like,
there's another.
Like, Chris, I got to hang out with Chris more.
There's a thing tomorrow. Unfortunately, you're going to miss it. So the way all that came about is one day I was hanging out with a couple of friends, and we were like, I don't even know who brought it up. We're like, what are we doing? It's like, there's nothing to do. And I had started looking on Facebook events. And if you go like really deep down the list, you just start getting really weird stuff. And
I've never trolled Facebook events.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to.
And I don't like I just was doing it like kind of haphazardly, and of course it'll be like garbage.
Yeah.
But then there'll just be like it gets really odd, and you can like tell it the things to look for. And then this like underground wrestling thing was on there, and I'm like, you guys want to go to an underground wrestling stuff? And my friend Lauren's like, only if we have mushrooms. I'm like, great, let's do it. So we eat mushrooms and go to fucking, what is it? It's like, I just went brain dead. Just above Long Beach in San Pedro.
What is it, like Redondo or something like that, or most are further south still?
No, I guess
like it's not the Palisades, it's the other one.
Other direction.
North?
Yeah.
Or south?
Or north, I guess.
I forgot.
Anyway,
yeah.
It's like right there, like
north
just there, like north of San Pedro and the docks there, like in between like
okay.
San Pedro and Long Beach, like right over here. I just went brain dead what it's called, but they had PCW, this wrestling thing. So we go there and we're on mushrooms and out of our brain, and it's insane. And I'm just like, this is fucking amazing. And then I start finding like more and more, and I get deeper in this world, and like there's these like East LA spots that are like have like a fucking VFW Moose Lodge or whatever that are doing these like underground wrestling shows. And what I initially am really obsessed with is I realized that there is this is like the punk band version of wrestling. Like if going to WWE is like seeing Aerosmith in a stadium.
Yeah.
This is the Black Flag
of
wrestling. And these people tour. And they're like, this is their life. They're like, it's like this underground like punk band equivalent. And it was awesome because it's, again, it doesn't have all of the weird like redneck KKK baggage or whatever like you have like in that, Kentucky growing up associated with wrestling, but like it's like violent theater. It's like a violent ballet, and it's all like pageantry and orchestrated stuff like that, but it's, I don't know, it's just like super entertaining to me. And I got super obsessed with it, and I was like, this is amazing. And I start trying to drag all my friends to it, and usually what happens is that you tell them about it and they're like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But then if you can con somebody into actually going with you and seeing it, they're like, holy fuck, this is amazing. And same thing with monster trucks. I was actually living right by Dodger Stadium, and it was my birthday. And my friend Magda was like, hey, like, you want to go to monster trucks? It's at Dodger Stadium right now. We got some extra tickets. I'm like, sure. So, whatever. I went there. I was also eating mushrooms and watching monster trucks. I was like, this is fucking amazing at Dodger Stadium. And it was just like chill. Everyone was there just to have fun. And then I start like for a period of time, it was like on my birthday, because it always came through like around February, we'd get everybody and we'd go to monster trucks, and they started doing it at Angel Stadium. And then I had like, Laurel, and then, Laurel's like husband-in-law-ish or whatever whatever their arrangement is, Roger Manning, her partner. He is, like Beck's permanent keyboard player and this like A-list session guy, and he's in like this group Jellyfish. He is the absolute antithesis of monster trucks from a personality standpoint.
Yeah.
Like mellow, like just not his scene in any capacity. Took him out to Anaheim. We're watching monster trucks at Angel Stadium, and he's just like, this is amazing
moment.
Yeah, he's like, Chris, thank you so much for making me come to this. And it's hilarious.
Crazy,
awesome.
Man.
Yeah.
Cool. So those are the main things you got like as side hobbies right now?
Yeah.
I love it, dude.
Yeah.
This was fucking great. I mean, I had no idea about almost all of it, which is a treat to learn more. And I'm glad we got to pull this off last minute. When I get back, I'm definitely going to have to hit you up for some underground wrestling. And in February,
I'm the plug.
Dude,
you know a guy.
Monster trucks. Yeah.
Holler.
Fucking crazy. Well, thank you again for coming in.
Pleasure
to do this.
is mine.
And can't thank you enough for everything. Honestly, like you're like one of the people I really just am fucking grateful for to have in my life. So
anytime.
I mean, I already tell everybody that if you're gonna build a studio, you're the guy to talk to. There's just nobody fucking else even worth having a conversation with. So hopefully anybody watching this who may be in need will hit you up. And, you never know where those projects will just fucking trickle in from.
All right.
Epic, man. Thank you.
Pleasure is mine.
That was fucking great, dude.
Yeah, thanks, dude.